Greetings, this is Brother Eli with another episode of Bible Truth Revealed. Today's teaching is entitled, The Truth About Fringes. That is, the truth about fringes. When Israelites awaken to the truth of our identity as the chosen people of the Most High, we quickly learn that we are commanded to wear fringes on the borders of our garments. However, we usually have no idea what fringes are, so we simply wear whatever is introduced to us as fringes. For some, these are the tassels like those worn by the Babylonians and the Assyrians. Others are presented with zit-zits like those worn by the Jewish people. However, the simple fact is that the Most High never commanded us to wear either Babylonian or Assyrian tassels or Jewish zit-zits. In this teaching, we will explore the Holy Scriptures, which Christians call the Old Testament, to answer the following questions. 1. What are fringes? 2. What are the rules for wearing fringes? 3. Are we required to wear fringes today? And 4. Is it ever acceptable to not wear fringes? I will be reading from the Brenton Septuagint translation. Question 1. What are fringes? Psalm chapter 132 in the Brenton Septuagint translation is Psalm 133 in the KJV. So I'm reading Psalm 132 verses 1 to 2 in the Brenton Septuagint translation. It says, See now, what is so good, or what so pleasant, as for brethren to dwell together? It is as ointment on the head, that ran down to the beard, even the beard of Aaron, that ran down to the fringe of his clothing. There was a fringe, singular, at the bottom of Aaron's clothing. This is what the ointment ran down to. This fringe, singular, was the hem of Aaron's garment, not a bunch of strings or tassels like many Israelites wear today. Let's learn more about the fringe, singular, at the bottom of Aaron's garment. Exodus chapter 28, I will read verse 2 and verse 33. That's Exodus chapter 28, verse 2 and verse 33. It says, And thou shalt make holy apparel for Aaron thy brother, for honor and glory. Verse 33. And under the fringe, singular, of the robe below, so that's the bottom of Aaron's robe, thou shalt make, as it were, pomegranates of a flowering pomegranate tree, of blue and purple and spun scarlet, and fine linen spun under the fringe, singular, of the robe round about. Golden pomegranates of the same shape, and bells round about between these. So we are learning that in Aaron's holy apparel or garment or clothing, there was a fringe, singular, below or on the bottom of his robe. These scriptures make it clear that the fringe of a garment is simply the hem of a garment. Question number 2. What are the rules for wearing fringes? Deuteronomy chapter 22 verse 12. Deuteronomy chapter 22 verse 12 says, Thou shalt make fringes on the 4 borders of thy garments, with whichsoever thou mayest be clothed. If a fringe is simply a hem, why does the scripture speak of fringes in plural? It is because there is to be a hem on each of the four borders of our garments. When this commandment was given, Israelites wore long, loose, flowing garments. These garments, such as robes, tunics, mantles, cloaks, and dresses, had a top, also known as the collar, a bottom, also known as the skirt, and two sleeves. Those are the four borders of Israelite garments. We were commanded to put a fringe or hem on each of these four borders. That's why it says, thou shalt make fringes, plural, on the four, that's plural, borders, plural, of thy garments, plural. One fringe or hem on each of the four borders is how we get plural. But a fringe is simply a hem. To learn more about the long, loose, flowing garments that were worn by our forefathers, please listen to my teaching entitled, Will Women in Pants Be Destroyed? That is, will women in pants be destroyed? From Deuteronomy chapter 22 verse 12, we learn that 1. We must make fringes or hems on the four borders of our garments. This refers to the collar, the bottom, and the two sleeves. As Israelites did not wear pants when this commandment was given, all our clothing, which were long, loose, flowing garments, had four borders: the collar, the bottom, and the two sleeves. Number 2, there must be fringes or hems on all our clothing. This is the meaning of thy garments with whichsoever thou mayest be clothed. If you wear it, you need to add fringes or hems to the borders of that garment. The very definition of the word hem confirms that a fringe is a hem. The Merriam-Webster Dictionary defines the word hem as a border of a cloth article doubled back and stitched down. A synonym given is fringe. That's because a hem is a fringe and a fringe is a hem. The Most High commanded us to double back and stitch down the four borders of our garments. In other words, we are required to put a hem, also known as a fringe, on each of the four borders of our garments. The word hem as a verb is defined as to surround in a restrictive manner or to confine. The purpose of fringes or hems is to surround the four borders of our garments in a restrictive manner. This prevents the borders from tearing or fraying. In other words, from being rent, torn. We can confirm this in Exodus chapter 28, verses 31 to 32. Exodus chapter 28, verses 31 to 32 reads thus: And thou shalt make the full-length tunic all of blue. So this is a long, loose, flowing garment, verse 32. And the opening of it shall be in the middle, having a fringe round about the opening, the work of the weaver, woven together in the joining of the same piece, that it might not be rent. So this fringe is so that the garment might not be rent. It's round about the opening, that it might not be torn torn. It might not fray. We have fringes on the four borders of our garments so that those borders will not tear. You put a fringe or a hem on your collar so that the collar does not tear or fray, that it might not be rent. You put a hem or fringe on the bottom of your garment for the same purpose. You put a hem or a fringe on each of your sleeves so that it would not tear or be rent. The four borders of the garments must have hems, also known as fringes. Question number 3. Are we required to wear fringes today? Numbers chapter 15, I will read verses 37 to 40. Numbers chapter 15 verses 37 to 40 says, "And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to the children of Israel, and thou shalt tell them, and let them make for themselves fringes upon the borders of their garments throughout their generations." So the children of Israel are required to make fringes upon the borders of our garments throughout our generations, as long as the children of Israel continue to exist or generate. As long as there is a generation of Israelites, we must wear fringes or hems on the borders of our garments. The good news is that most garments today are already fringed. They're already hemmed. So there's no good reason not to have a hem on each of the four borders of our garments. It continues, "And ye shall put upon the fringes of the borders a lace of blue. And it shall be on your fringes, and ye shall look on them, and ye shall remember all the commands of the Lord and do them." The Most High wants that when we look upon our fringes or hems with the lace of blue, that we remember his commandments and do them. "And ye shall not turn back after your imaginations, and after the sight of your eyes, in the things after which ye go a whoring, that ye may remember and perform all my commands. And ye shall be holy," that means set apart, "unto your God." The commandment to wear fringes or hems on the borders of our garments is one of the easiest commandments for us to keep, because most clothing is already hemmed. It's already fringed. There's no good reason for us to break this commandment. Question number 4. Is it ever acceptable to not wear fringes? As I just stated, now that we understand that fringes are simply hems and most clothing is already hemmed, there is no good excuse for not wearing fringes. However, let's consider an example in the scriptures of when it was best to not be identified as an Israelite. Therefore, it was best to not wear a lace of blue on the hems or fringes of one's clothing, because that is what identifies the Israelites. It's not the fringe, because almost everybody wears fringes or hems, but it's the lace of blue on the fringe or hem that identifies an Israelite. Esther chapter 2, verses 8 to 11 and verse 20. Esther chapter 2, verses 8 to 11 and verse 20 says, "And because the king's ordinance was published, many damsels were gathered to the city Susa under the hand of Guy, and Esther was brought to Guy, the keeper of the woman." So if you're familiar with the story of Esther, you know that the king was looking for a new wife. So many women were brought together so the king could choose a new wife. And Guy was the chamberlain, the one who looked after these women. So Esther was brought to Guy, the keeper of the women. Verse 9. And the damsel pleased him. So he liked Esther, and she found favor in his sight. And he hasted to give her the things for purification and her portion. And the 7 maidens appointed her out of the palace. So she was appointed 7 maidens to serve her. And he treated her and her maidens well in the woman's apartment. So Esther was living in an apartment with 7 maidens. Verse 10, but Esther discovered not her family, nor her kindred, for Mordecai had charged her not to tell. So her uncle had told her, don't let anyone know that you are an Israelite. So consider this. Guy is a keeper of the woman. He's watching over Esther. Esther has had 7 maidens appointed to her from the palace, and all of them are living together in an apartment. But no one knows that Esther is an Israelite. If Esther was wearing the lace of blue on the hems of her garments, she would have immediately been identified as an Israelite. But her uncle Mordecai had charged her not to tell, not to reveal her identity. So there are times when it is in our best interest to conceal our identity. And we can do that by not wearing the lace of blue on the fringes or hems of our garments. Verse 11. But Mordecai used to walk every day by the woman's court to see what would become of Esther. Mordecai wanted to ensure that no one found out that Esther was an Israelite. If she was wearing a lace of blue on the fringes or hems of her garments, she would have been easily identified as an Israelite. So it should be clear that she was not wearing a lace of blue on the fringes or hems of her garment, because she wanted to conceal or hide her identity. Verse 20. Now Esther had not discovered her kindred, so she spent all this time in the apartment with 7 maidens and with Guy watching over her, and no one had a clue that she was an Israelite. It continues. For so Mordecai commanded her to fear God and perform his commandments as when she was with him. And Esther changed not her manner of life. So she was a righteous woman that feared the Most High God, and she kept his commandment, yet she did not reveal her identity. We can keep the commandments of the Most High God without revealing our identity. Esther feared the Most High, and she kept his commandments. She did not change her manner of life, even when she was living in the king's palace. Yet she managed to conceal her identity by not telling anyone she was an Israelite, and by not wearing the lace of blue that identifies us as the Israelite. So to reiterate, we can easily fulfill the commandment to wear fringes or hems on our clothing without revealing our identity. Nevertheless, it helps to have some clothing with the lace of blue and others without the lace of blue, so we can easily conceal our identity when it is in our best interest to do so. This wise decision enabled Esther to attain a position in which she ultimately prevented the genocide or mass murder of our people. In conclusion, the Most High commanded the children of Israel to wear fringes or hems on the four borders of our garments throughout our generations. This means that all our clothing should have hems, and this still applies today. Fortunately, most clothes today are already fringed or hemmed, so we only need to add the lace of blue. However, as we are living in the lands of our captivity, amongst our enemies, we must exercise caution when dealing with our enemies. Only a handful of Israelites have a correct understanding of the fringes or hems, and this means that not many Israelites are properly keeping this commandment today. Therefore, for the moment, we do not have to worry about being identified as Israelites if we prefer to conceal our identity. However, when lots of Israelites wake up to the truth of the fringes and start wearing the lace of blue, it might be wise to keep some clothing that do not have the lace of blue. This will allow us to conceal our identity when it is in our best interest to do so. And with that, I say, Shalom.